So today we're starting with composing React components and passing data via props. So in this lecture today, we'll be working with different multiple components. We'll be nesting components. We'll be working with something called props that you will learn in a little bit. So in the introduction, it says, as you build a bigger applications, you want to start splitting up your apps into smaller pieces so that it's easier to work on and maintain. These smaller pieces you'll be built are called components. Components will need to share a state. So we learned a state last time. We learned how to create a basic state. So, and also it says, so we will learn how to do this with a helper object called props. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to use JavaScript modules to export and import components, describe props and how data flows in React application, demonstrate the ability to compose React components to build out a UI, pass props as dynamic data to React components. So those are the kind of things that we'll focus today. And we will start by building a React app from scratch, and we will use that to build out the examples that we will go through. So I'm assuming most of you read part of this file. So hopefully we will go deep into what you already learned. Okay, so we'll start by just creating a basic React app. We can use a code sandbox, but I want you to get used to learning how to create your own React app. It will come in handy later on. Could be able to use stack plates as editor instead of sandbox. We will not be using sandbox or code sandbox. We'll just be using React VS Code. So so code sandbox is good for teaching and everything, but also I would like you to get used to creating your own app. So that's why we're starting from scratch. Okay, so let's get started and open our terminal and create a new app here. So we'll just zoom in. So we'll start from scratch here. So now let me go to the folder that I want. So I'll say CD pictures, and then I'll say CD to, I think, Gabby. Okay, so here's what we will create our app. We just say mbx create React app, and then we'll give it a name. This one we'll call it components and underscore props. So we'll be talking about more about components, and also we'll go in depth into props. So it's gonna go ahead and create the app for us, and then we'll open it and we'll create steps of what we want to learn today. So while this is doing this, let's just read a little bit about some of the important. Let me just explain basically what this is talking about. So we will be connecting components. So last time, you guys remember, we created a component. One component is the app.js component. That's one component, and it already finished. So let me just cd to what do we called component on props, and then let me open it to VS Code. So last time we learned about app.js. That's one component. You could create more components, and we will do that today. So basically, this is saying is that way back in the days before we had like React and things like that, JavaScript didn't have a way to grab things from another file. So let's say most of the time when you're working with JavaScript, you will see that it has like a way to kind of like check a way to tell the browser, let's say the HTML file, where the JavaScript is located. So that's one way to connect JavaScript to another file. But then so if you want to do multiple files, you have to make sure the order the order matters. So you have to make sure that the one you want to run first is the top one. So you have to say script, and then source, and then give the file, and then you go right. So we did that before. So you give the file names right one after another, and make sure that the order is correct. So that was one way of doing it. So the problem with that one is, and we use it today, but we only use it when we're connecting it to like HTML. The problem with that one is it invokes the global what do you call the global object. So every time you run that, it runs in the global environment, and that creates problems for performance and different things, especially if you have hundreds of them running at the same time. So one way to kind of like change that was using different JavaScript libraries. There's some libraries called Webpack, some libraries, Babel, which we talked about last time, and also there's few other libraries that that people use to kind of like make sure that the files they're getting are exact files, and they get only the files they need and what they need from that file. And that was one way to kind of like change that way of grabbing information from another JavaScript file, especially if you're connecting two JavaScript files. Also, there is this function that you could use where you put a parenthesis before it and you structure like this. This means every time you create a function like this, it means run right away. So it's called IFI. It stands for immediately invoked function expression. So it's basically a function that you could use to run all your other functions right away instead of waiting. So this helped with the global scope stuff, because this is inside a function and all your other JavaScript is inside this function. So they are function scoped. But then there is few other problems, especially when it comes to performance and things like that. So right now JavaScript itself, in 2015, they introduced a way to export files and import files. So instead of you worrying about the global environment, polluting the global environment, or worrying about performance and things like that, you could export the files you want, you could import the files you want. So that's what JavaScript ECMAScript, I think it was 2015, introduced the export and import keyword. And those keywords make it easy so that you could export some JavaScript information or JavaScript code from one file and import it in another file. And that is also, it exists in other languages like Python and Java and other languages, but JavaScript didn't have that, so they introduced that. So now it's native to JavaScript. That's why we use it in React. So as you have seen from last lesson, React has a lot of imports. So just keep in mind that this is kind of recent. It happened right before React became kind of famous. So it's something important to understand. Let me see. I think someone sent me a message. What was the command line for the app? So I used this key. So if you want to kind of like import React into your computer, you use this keyword, which is mbx create React app, and then you give it a name, so whatever name you want. So we kind of like went over this in the last lecture, but I can let me share that here. Okay. So sorry about that. So yeah, so if you want to create React, this is how you create it. You could create it in a different way. There's another way to create React, but you have to know a lot about Webpack, Babel, and you have to know a lot about file management and different things. So you have to kind of start from scratch and create your own stuff. React is very complicated underneath, but when you use this create React app command, it's pretty easy. It just gives you what you need right here. And then you could just go ahead and run it. You could just say npm start, and it opens in the browser, and it opened here. So it opened in the browser and it's like that. So it's done. So it's pretty easy to get started with it. But if you want to do it your own way, it becomes complicated. So just keep that in mind. That. All right. So, okay. So let's get back to what we just imported, what we just created. So for people who were not here last time or didn't watch the lecture, so this is React files. The first one is node modules, is where all the files that you don't want to change anything are located, and you use Node.js to import, export, or install or things like that. If you want to install any packages, and this is where all the packages go to. So you don't touch the node module. The public is where the HTML file is located and a few other files. So this HTML is what the browser looks at first when it runs when it runs React. The source file is where all the source files or all the code that you will create, where it's gonna be hosted. And then there is git ignore, which ignores some of the files when you put it in GitHub, just such as node modules. And package.json is a file that keeps track of what your app should look like. So it keeps track of the name of your app, the version of your app, dependencies, which are packages that you can use to make changes to your app. So for example, here you can see React DOM, which is a thing that you could use to create to connect to the DOM basically. And then there's a React package right there. So React itself is a package. So it's not like something that is foreign. So it's a package itself that you could actually check the code of React itself and how it's written. If you go to npm node package manager, and then there's a README, and then there is yarn, which is same as package.json. So the yarn is only if you have a yarn installed in your computer. So if you don't have it, you will not see that. So today we're basically focusing on creating different components, connecting those components, grabbing information from one file, showing it in another file, using state and props to move data from one component to another component. So that's going to be our focus today. I'm going to delete a couple of things like the logo. We don't need the logo. I'm going to delete this. We don't need it. Our app's going to crash, but that's fine. I will set it up so that it runs well. So let's delete all this so you don't get confused with all these files. Let's actually delete this too. No, we'll keep the CSS. It's fine. Okay, so that's all we need right now. So let's remove a couple of things like the logo from here. If you import something and it's not located anywhere, it will give you an error. And we have to remove it from here too. So let's just remove all this from here, save it. Go here and remove a couple of things like this. Let's remove this too. So you'll have all this out of the box when you create React. So as you can see, we still have an error, and that error is probably coming from, let's see. Okay. No such directory open, logo, okay. So it's coming from the logo. We have the logo somewhere. So let's see, it's not here. It's not here. Okay. So let me save it again. So usually when you have this issue and you don't see, you fixed everything, but it's still showing you error, it's best to kind of like restart the whole thing. So So you open the terminal, and then you go to the file that was running, and you stop it by Control C, and then start it again. That will give you the file. So right now it's there's nothing in it, so that's why it's black. All right. So the main thing that we need to focus today is I'm going to create one file here. So in here, we're going to create one file. I'm going to call it data.js. So we're going to have a data in here, and I'm going to import that data. So I'm going to import one data here first to start with. So this is basically saying largest lakes in Minnesota. So this is just basic, what do you call, array. So we're going to be using that data to import in here on different components. Okay, so to start with, let me just create another folder inside the source. So this folder, we're going to be hosting all the components, and this is kind of like a tradition for React, is by creating component and putting all the components in there. So let me just move app.js there, and move the app.css. Okay, it's gonna give probably an error. Let me just make this one small so you guys can see whenever it updates. Let's make this one small. Hopefully you can see everything clearly now. All right, so now it's giving us error. It's saying we have to go to here index.js because we it's actually updated automatically here, so you can see. So that's good. Let's just save that. It's giving us an error. I don't know today why it's giving us a lot of errors, but the main important thing is we have our setup ready, so we can just actually maybe restart the thing. It shouldn't give us all these errors, but hopefully we're not going to move any more stuff around. So let me Control C and then restart. It's going to go to the other screen. All right, so it's back here. So now we have it here. Okay, so now to just check that this app.js is rendering, I'm just going to put h2 here, and I'm going to say our main app, or I'll say this one app.js, just to make sure that what's rendering is the app.js. So as you can see, it's rendering. So now let's just create a couple of steps before we do anything. As you can see here, we're not importing React. You could import React if you want. So the first thing you need to do every time you create a file is import React. But for the app.js, usually you could just skip it. But let's just import React because we're gonna need it. React from React. Okay, doesn't matter if you do that. It will still work the same way. But we're going to use state and things like that, so we need it like that. All right, so let me save this too. So the main thing now is we need to do step by step. So let me just create a step. So I'll say step one. Step one, we need to import data.js. So we need to import this file, that data.js, in here. So to import it, we just say import, and then how do we do it? I just want to understand if you guys following me. How do we import this file, data.js?
The same way you imported the CSS?
The same way? Okay, right. So that's one way of importing it. But remember, we have something in here. We have largest lakes. So if we do this, so if we do that, just like that, and also keep in mind that when you import in something, this the data.js is not in the component. So you have to go outside of components. So to go outside of components, you start with 2 dots and then you say slash, and then it shows you what's outside of component. And if we just do that, it will basically right now what we're doing is we're importing it, but we're not telling it what to import. So we have to give it a name of what we need to import. So for example, we have this, but what if we have a couple other things? Let's say, and also we will learn a little bit more about like this export stuff. Right now we're just doing the import. But if we have a couple of more things, we use the name of that to target it. So in here app.js, we say import, and mostly like, let's say other apps like this one, app.js, it has export default. So the difference between export default and this one, and we could actually create a function here. We could say something like, let's create like an empty function. So let's say function, let's say something like cities. Usually when you're doing this, you do capital cities, and we just do that, and then return. We just return a just one div, or let's return a paragraph and say cities. Okay. So now if we want to export this one, we say export default cities. Okay. So now what is the difference between this export, which we could just say here, it's going to be same as this. So we could just say remove that, and we could say export largest lakes. Okay, we could say that too. So that's the same as what we had before. So traditionally, it's best to keep it if it's just an array, it's best to keep export at the beginning. So the difference between this export and this export is that this export is indicating that this is a default. So whenever we export this this component, it will, the other app, so the other component, like let's say app, it will just grab the cities. So it will not know what this largest lakes is. So when you importing it, you import it different ways. So if you want to import the largest lakes, you put it inside curly brackets. So this is called a named named export. So we say largest lakes, right? It's like that. So that is that's how you export a named one. But if you want, we have to say, do we say import? Import, yeah. I don't know why it's giving us issue here. Oh, from, yeah. We're missing from. Okay. So, and the way why it made it dim is because we're not using it yet. So if you use it, it will make it lighter. So this is how you import a named. So this is called a named component, or you could say named object or whatever it is. And here's how you import the other one. So you say import, and it was called cities. You say cities, you give it the same name. From, you could say from data, okay? Just like that. So the difference is the way you import it. This one, you import it but with the curly brackets. And also you could have multiple here. So you could have another one here. And this one you import it like that. You could also, instead of doing 2 lines, you could just put it here. You could say cities and then do that. And you could just get rid of this. So that's the difference between importing a component or importing just a object or an array or whatever. Another thing is, so here, let me just write down a couple of notes for people that will come in the future. So here you can have multiple named exports. exports in a file, but only one default, one export default. Okay, you can only have one export default. You can't have multiple export default when you're in one file. So that's very, very important to keep that in mind. All right, so we don't need these cities, so we can just get rid of the cities. We only need the largest lakes. Okay, I think someone is talking. Maybe if you mute yourself. All right, let's see. How many of you left? How many you left, please, in the source folder? What do you mean? Someone messaged me. So now we have this component folder. We could add more components in there. We could also messed it up here. So we're trying to pass down information to other components. So the first step is we imported the data. Okay, so that's the first step. The next step is we need to also, let me create a few other components before that. So to create that, you just right click, new file. We'll create one we called, let me call it, I'll call it data. And usually when you create a component, to give it a capital, the first letter is capital. So let's call it data props.js. It's not JJS. So JS. Another one will be greeting. So we'll create another component called greeting.js. So we have those two components, two extra components, and they're empty right now. So let's just close them. Okay. No, it's not closing. But let's go to here. Close that, we don't need all this. All right. So the next step is, so that was, we created that. The next step is we need to create a state for the data that we grabbed. So this data. So the data, if we want to passing down means if we want to send it to other components, we have to put it in a state. That's the only way. And you guys learned a little bit about state and what it is. State is a way to keep the data of the component, and you cannot modify or change directly the state. So it keeps track of the information. It's more like when we were creating, remember we created classes and we had we had constructors in the classes. So the constructors is the state, is where the information is. And then any information that comes from the constructor, you could pass it down to other child classes. So state is more similar to that. So to create a state in a functional component, you say constant, and then you say equal to, and then you will use something called use state, which is which we call a hook, and you have to import this. You have to bring this from React. The way to bring this from React is by going up here and saying use state. Okay, and you can look up this. We talked about it last lecture. So use state is a hook created by React, and it's a way to keep track of the data of this component. So we just pass this data to this state, and it will make sure that data is not changeable. You could only copy it and do something with the copy, but you cannot directly change the data itself. So here we'll just say, we'll just put here lakes. That's all this information. And then we'll put here set lakes. And this will mean, this will be a way to change it. So the use state itself is giving you a way to change the data or to update the data. And the only way to do that is by using set and then whatever the name it is. So this lakes, you could do whatever you want, but the convention is to make it capital. Whatever the state is, this is current state, is to make it capital and then say set lakes. So, okay. And then if it's something like a score here, you say set score here.
And how does the lakes and the set lakes connect to largest lakes after?
So the way it connects is by putting the largest lakes here. So this is the variable, and you're grabbing it from here. And use state takes. So let me see if I can draw things here. So use state takes the data. It takes the data from here, and it pushes it to here, which was lakes. I made it score now, but lakes. That would be this this data. It will be right here. So if you want to change something, let's say you want to update you want to add one more lake, and we have a list of all the largest lakes in Minnesota. If you want to add one more lake, you say set lake, and then you add the lake that you want. So that would be one way to update, and we will see how to do that. So let me just go back to lakes instead of score. Okay, just lake here, or we should say lakes, and then here lakes. Okay. Any questions so far about the state?
When you put the lakes and set lakes, does that mean you're looping through the largest lakes?
Not really. You just take in the largest lakes, which is basically an array, just basic array, and you're just putting it right there. So you're not doing anything with it. You're just grabbing it, dumping it here, and then you have this one more method to manipulate it. Like if you want to do something here, let's say you do mapping over it, and then maybe you want to add one more thing. You just say you use set lake, and you say add this new thing to these lakes, and then it will just update this, and this will update the data from here. But this will not physically update. It will keep it in the state, which is the lakes here. So your data here will be same, will be like this, but the lakes will update, and it will keep that information for you. Okay.
So console log lakes, it will show the updated version.
So right now, if we console log lakes, let's console log lakes. It will show you exact the same information as the array that we have. So I'm gonna name it lakes. So let's save it. Let's go to here, inspect. Let's go to console. And right here we have it, lakes. And if you expand it, it's just a list of the lakes. It doesn't do anything to it. It just
okay.
it keeps. Yeah.
Can you console log the set lakes then?
You cannot. So if you if you console log set lakes, it will give you a function. So it will give you the what it uses basically to make to modify the state. So this is kind of like a background thing that React uses to update the state, but it still also have the state, the older state. So it's a kind of like a background thing that you don't want to deal with. So if let's say we want to modify this, we want to add something to this lake. So we just say, let's say we want to add one more thing to it. We say, so here we can loop through it. It's best to loop through it first, and then. But I'm just going to show you like a pseudo code instead of just go deep into it. So you say set lakes, and then you will pass here a usually an object. So usually it's best to put this in an object. So just like that, because it's easier to update the object. And then you could just add one more thing here. You could also say, you could use a spread operator, what they call a spread operator. And you could say that. So this is the old state. This is the old information. And then you could add one more thing here. Or let's say if it's an object, you could add one more information here. So let's say lake, you could add Lake Superior. Okay. So, and then that will add, you have to loop through it first to add what you want to add, but this will add one more thing to the list of the lakes, basically. And we will learn that later in a deeper way. Okay. So when you have the state, now you could just pass it right here. So let's say we want to pass the lakes in here, we have to map over it. So let's say we have, instead of the lakes, let's say we have like some other state. So let's just copy and paste this. And we're just going to create a fake, let's say we say names here. And here we say set names. And we just put like a couple of names here. So let's actually just put one name. Let's say Muhammad or something like that. Okay, let's make it one name. Okay, so if we want to show the state here in our JSX, we can just create a paragraph, let's say, and then just say name, and then give a curly bracket, which is a way to show JavaScript within the JSX, and then we say name. And because there's nothing to loop through, so it will just show Muhammad right here. So we just grab a name and put it right here, and it just shows right there. Okay. If you have something to loop through, you have to put the map here, and we will see that today as an example, because we have to show the lakes. Okay. So any questions so far? Okay. And we don't need the curly brackets here. That's usually when you're updating. All right. So we also need to import. These components in here. So let's do that before we do anything else. So one thing about we'll actually get through. We'll go to that before I do that. Let me just do step 2, or this is just part of the importing. So we just say import data and other components. So we'll import data props from we'll say from, oh, okay, I don't know. So we'll say from dot. If you say one dot and then slash, it will give you what you have right next to you. If you say 2 dots and a slash, it will give you what's outside of this folder. So keep that in mind. Something good to learn that. All right, and also let's import the other one to import greeting from dot, and then that's it, greeting. So we have those 2 components here, and we will use those. The next thing is we need to, okay, what's the step 2? So we imported that. Now we need to basically pass this data, the largest lakes, to data props. We need to pass that. You could also call it like lakes if we want. You could call the component whatever you want, but it's basically, it's showing the props. It's basically passing props. I'll show you how to pass props, and that's where we learn. So let's just remove that. So now what we're going to do is, if we want to pass something, if we want to pass like the lakes, let's actually call it like, let's call it lakes, just to make it easy. And VS Code kind of like renames things for you easily. Okay, so if we want to pass this data, the largest lakes, to this component lakes, we have to use props, something called props. And here, all we have to do is, this is the parent. So app.js is the parent app. And this is something that is very hard for a lot of people to understand when it comes to passing data. So if we want to pass data, we have to put the data, the state, in the highest parent component. And the parent component right now is app.js. How is it the parent component? Because app.js is the app that we grab to show the browser. So how do we do that? How do we take everything in app.js and how do we show it in the browser. To do that, you go to index.js. Index.js is kind of like the connection between React and the browser, or I would say the HTML. As you can see here, it's showing basic thing that you guys already learned. It's grabbing in ID called root, and it's showing everything we create, even the CSS and the JavaScript and everything we create go to that basic root div. So, and as you can see here, app.js is right here. We imported using this, and that's why it's the parent. Index.js is just a way to connect to the browser, but app.js is the parent. And also, if you want to know where this root is right here in the public, and you go to index.html, and it's right there. So that's what is showing the browser, everything that we write down. Okay. So when you're passing a data, you have to put the data in the top, the highest level of what do you call in your components. I want to just show you a basic graph of how. So let's say React props passing. I want to see an example of image of. There's also something called prop drilling. So you go from the top highest component and you pass your data down. This is not showing well, but this is, imagine this is app.js, and then you pass the data to another one. Now we pass it to like lakes. Lakes can pass to another one too. So the same data can be passed to another component, but the data cannot be passed back. So we cannot pass a data from lakes to app.js, and also lakes cannot pass the data to a component that is same level as it is. So you cannot cross share state or the data. You could only go down and share it down. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's also, when it comes to React, that's one of the, not React, but props. Using props, that's one of the limits of props. That's why in the future, you guys go to learn different ways of managing the data, removing it from here and putting it somewhere else, so you could use it in any component. Okay. So right now our data is right here. So we have our data right here. To pass it to lakes, all we have to do is, we don't even need this header. All we have to do is we need to call the greeting, not the greeting, the lakes here. So we just do that, and then we capital letter here, lakes, and then we just do that. So right now, all we're doing is we're rendering lakes. So if we actually go to our browser where our app is rendering, and let me show you why this is rendering. So we have to actually create the data in here. We have to create a component. We didn't create any component. So I'll quickly create a component, not that. So I'll say React from React. I'll create a basic functional component. So I'll call, you usually call it the name of the file, the component. And here we will just return, we'll return some JSX. So we'll call this a div, and then we'll return a h3, and we'll call this our lakes, okay, h3. All right, so now, okay, what is this component missing? What is one thing that you have to have in all your components that this is missing? We touched a little bit on last time. Okay, so remember, every time you create a component, you have to export it. You have to export in component. I learned from someone used the IS kind of name, which stands for import. I think it's the other one is create component or create component. And the last one is export. So this is what you follow. You import everything you need. So now we just import React. because we don't need anything else right now. And then we create the component, and then you export the component. So to export components, you say export default, and then you give it the app name. You give the component the name, so which is legs. Save. So now it will render whatever we have in here. It should render in here. So we didn't actually save it, that's why it's not rendering. So as you can see here, we have the component, this component right here. So if we save it now, we have our legs, right? So that's what we wrote in this legs right here. And if we add something else, our legs, our city, whatever, as you can see, it updates automatically. So that's how you connect the two components, and you could import the component, and then you write it here. So we did that. So now that was the second step. So the step two, bring legs and greeting components. Okay. Okay. So we actually kind of said already here, but we'll skip that. So step, so we did that. We might be confused with the steps, but I'll try to keep it up. So we imported that. Now, how do we take this data and send it to legs? How do we do that? Does anyone remember from reading or seeing from anywhere? So if we want to pass the data to legs, which is this component, we have to use something called props, right? So what are props? So let's actually start a little bit of what props are. Let's basically read the basic introduction of props. Props, React. Props right here. So what are props? Okay. We want to like an introduction of what props are. Okay, so I don't know why it's not giving us introduction. What are props? Is a special keyword in React, which stands for properties and is being used for passing data from one component to another. So that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to pass from the app.js to the legs. But the important part of here is that data with props are being passed in unidirectional flow. Unidirectional flow. Remember, we just saw the graph where the data is being passed in one direction. So it only goes in one way. So keep that in mind. If you don't, if you miss that, you will be always confused. So it's unidirectional, and it's also you'll pass it from one component to another. So that's what props are. Think of props as like think of them as functional. So we're using functions, and you have parameters in the functions, right? Think of props are like parameters for React components, basically, right? So parameters for React components. So now the way we pass it, we say here, we just give it a name. This name doesn't matter. You can name whatever you want here, but keep in mind you have to use it in here in the legs, the same name. And then you say, you give this curly bracket, and then you say legs right here. So now if we save it and we go to here and we create a console log, and we also have to pass here props. Remember, we said props are similar to a functional arguments. So right here we say console log. We want to know what props are, basically what is in the props. So we say here props, save it. Let's go here, inspect, and let's make it a little bit bigger. Console. As you can see here, it's giving us a object. The object has one thing, which is legs, and it's a list of all the legs, right? If we go back to app.js and we pass another thing, let's pass something like location, and we say something like MN for Minnesota, and save it. If we come back here, now as you can see, this is the old one. If you can see, it has two things. It has the lakes, it has a location. So you could pass as many props as you want here. So props can be passed in like if you have like a list of things, let's say if you have an array or object, this is how you pass them, especially if they're like in the state or if they are like a variable here. So if you create a variable here and you say constant lakes and equal to, and you create a list here, usually you pass it like this. You give it a name. Usually the name is what the data is or the information, whatever you pass in, and then you give the variable. Now our variable is the state. If you want to pass like, let's say one thing that is just a simple string, you just put it in a string. You don't have to put it in this curly bracket. If you want to pass a number, you have to put it in a string. So let's say we say something like zip, let's say something like area code, right? Say area code. We have to put it in something like that, right? If it's a number. We cannot leave it like this. We cannot say 612, or if you put it like this, it will just treat it as a like normal string. So if you save it, you go here, you'll treat it as a string, like I see right here. Okay, so this is how you pass props in React from one component to another, and now that component can treat it whatever way it likes. So now, if you want to show it in here, you could show it, but this one is a list of an array, so you have to map over it. So right here, inside here, you could just right before the return, you could kind of like loop through it if you want. But if you want to show it in here in your browser, you could also use a map in here, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so okay, so one way to do that is first here, we'll just do it here first. So you say props that you say lakes, right? Because that's the name of it. And then you say map. Another way to do it is you could use something called, it's called the destruction. I think the spelling is like that, but I'm not sure. So destruction is you say constant, and then you do that, and then you put like lakes here, whatever is in the props, and you could just say equal to props. So let's say you have a lot of stuff in here, and you could just say lakes, location, things like that. So this is destruction. So that's another way to do it. All right. So let me just thought I put a do not disturb on. Okay. All right.
Props.lakes, is that the variable or from app.js that you created?
Is this
Or is
props.lakes?
Yeah, the lakes part, is it the variable that you created in apps, or is that the
Yep.
Is that the use state?
Yeah, so that's one thing to keep in mind. It's a good question. That's a really good question. So the name that this props.lakes is this name right here. So now if we change this, and we could see it in the console log, let's say something called like our lakes, let's say something like that. And we go here and we use the console log. We say props. We go here and we open it. As you can see, it shows our lakes now, right? It shows our lakes. And that's what we're trying to grab. So we're trying to grab that list of things. So if we want to do it, just say props.our lakes now. So it's this name here. So we'll just go back to lakes, right? All right, so we can loop through it here. We can just say props.lakes.map, and then we just do our thing here. We pass a inner function, and we just say something like item or whatever we could call it. And here we could just we could console log if we want. Okay, I'm just showing you this one as an example because we're not going to use this. We have to put the map in here, so the list shows here. So now if we do that, as you can see, it shows each leg by itself. So to put inside the JSX, which is this text, we could let's remove this, and we could just say we can create a list of them. So we could say UL here, and in that UL we could create a list. So each let's say each leg will become a list part. It will have a dot, so unordered list. So to do that, we just say we put a curly bracket here, and we say props.legs.map, and then here's we do the normal thing function, and we pass item, and here we could just do that. Okay, and right here we put the li, and then put item right here. You have to put item right there. There's different ways to do it. This is one way, but let's just see. Let's see if it rendered. It didn't render. Okay, so let's just go back here, and let me just get rid of this first. So if we want to do it, we have to return it actually. We have to return, and then say li, and then give it the item, right? Because this is a normal function. This is a callback function. So now if we save it, it shows the list of the legs here with the unordered list. And the reason why it's showing at the center is because in the app we have, I think that's app here, that CSS is centering everything. So that's how we show it, and we could just give it a name here. We could say H2 largest lakes in Minnesota. Okay. Any questions so far? So we basically use this curly bracket to run a JavaScript operation right here within the HTML, and then we set return, and then we return this. If you want to return more than one thing, you could do the same thing as here by giving it a parenthesis, and then go into the next line, and then having another parenthesis. So if you want to do a couple of things, that's how you do it. If you have one thing, you could just do it in one line here. So basically what we did was the app.js basically told the legs component, hey, I have something for you here. Take this and take it to your app. So legs brought that information by bringing props here. So when you say props, so React basically says, okay, I'm gonna see if there's any props, and it gives that information, and then we can use the props to show it in here. So any questions so far? That's pretty much it for props. That's how you use props. Is basically you pass things down. So now let's say if we want to pass something from here to, let's say, greeting, then you could import greeting here and then pass it down to greeting. So let's say we want to pass, let's say maybe, let's say we have another prop here, another prop like location, we call it, let's say MN, right? And we want to pass that to another component, let's say greeting. Let's actually create another component as an example. Let's call it something like city.js, and we want to pass it here. Let's copy instead of typing the whole thing, I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. And we're going to call it here city and remove all this. But here we're going to put it a past info from lakes and give it a paragraph here. We're going to put that information here in the paragraph. But now we have to put that the city in here. So I have to import city from that city, right? Like that. And then we have to put it somewhere here. we have to say, and keep in mind that when you're using JSX, you have to have a parent element all the time. So we say city and we pass a prop here. So let's say location, and then we say location would be props. Remember props dot location. So I hope you understand where I'm going with this. So where I got this from, props dot location. Can anyone tell me where did I get the props dot location from?
Yeah, you already created somewhere. I saw you.
Right here, right? I created
I just
in the
confused with the multiple files.
yeah.
Between.
So app.js, I created app.js, this prop, and I passed it to Lakes. Lakes went ahead and passed that information to city. Now we could just grab that information from city. So, and also we do here city, right? So we could actually show it here. We could just say, props dot location, and it should show that right there. Amen. So that's the magic of React, is basically like passing different information to different components and connecting them in different ways so that you have a very robust application. So that was an example of props. If you're confused anything about props, let me know right now. I can go over it. All right, let me see what we have left. We have to do the greeting, which would be a way of also, we will learn a little bit more of props too. We'll understand a little bit more. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think we could take a break, come back and do more props and see how we can pass down props, and then we can answer questions. And then after that, I think we'll be done. All right. Let me see, someone send me a message. Can you explain why we are using multiple files? Can you explain why we're using multiple files? The reason why we're using multiple files is to show how different components work together. So the whole point of React is that you have components that do a specific thing. For example, when you're using like Facebook or even like Google. So if we have Google here, one component is this search, not even the whole search. This part of just writing the text is one component. When you do that, and this the recommendation is one component. This voice search thing is one component. This search thing icon is another component. This X is another component. So, for example, if Google is using, let's say, React, they will have like hundreds of components that work together, that's nested together, so that you could use this icon, this search icon, in different places. So you could use it in like in the Google, like Gmail, and it's all comes from one place. For example, when we're using like Twitter, so let's go to Twitter. Twitter is famous for like components. So if we're using Twitter, Twitter has so many things going on. It has this section of like links and like navigation. It has a button here, like you can click and create new tweet. The new tweet thing is also itself a component. And this section is a component. This whole section is a component, but it could be multiple components. The search is a component. So that's why we're using different files, is I want you to get used to working with the different components and nesting them so that you could reuse that. So for example, like right now, Twitter, it's using this, like right here, when you click, it's using this component right here. What's happening? But it's also right here too. What's happening? It's the same component, different places. You don't have to rewrite things again and again. You could just put it in different places. When you go to the person's profile, it could be right here. It could be at home. The search could be in different places, but it's one component. It's one thing. So that's why components are really important. Another thing about components is they're also reusable. We will learn that today, a little bit more about reusability. What does that mean? What does a component is reusable mean? For example, you have a tweet here, like we have one tweet here. This tweet is itself is one component, right? But all you have to do this component is you pass the seconds or the minutes or whatever passed when this tweet was created, the person's handle, the person's name, and the information they trying to share. All you have to do is we can literally create like a Twitter kind of like a style. You guys can create like a Instagram clone in coming up assignment. All we're doing is we have different components. We have a component called tweet, component called search, and the tweet one, all you're doing is you're passing information. Like you pass in the data that the person is trying to share, the name of the person, the handle of the person, and the date since this tweet was created, right? And all that is a prop. Like these are props. So this is the tweet, and one prop is, let's say, is data and or tweet. You could say if you want, and that's the text of the tweet. You could say this one handle, and that would be the name of the person, and all that you grabbing from like a database. And here you could also say date created, and you could give it a date here, right? And this whole tweet, everyone is going to use this tweet. So now when someone creates, it's just going to grab this tweet, and it's already created and it's empty. So right now, Lex, if you go to Lex, it doesn't have anything that you could identify as like a concrete information. So it doesn't have like the lakes names anywhere. We're just kind of rendering the lakes lake names. So as you can see, we're rendering. So it's kind of like you could actually pass anything. You can pass your tweets, right? And it renders tweets, right? So that's what we mean by like reusability, and we'll go deep into it in a little bit. So that's why we have different different files, different components. Any questions before we take a break? All right, we'll take a 10-minute break and then come back, and then inshallah we'll cover more about the props and components. So, all right, see you guys soon. Okay. Let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. Okay. So we're gonna do one more example of passing props and also reusability. We're gonna talk a little bit about how to create a component and use it again and again for different things. But then also I have a quick kind of like a problem for you guys. Actually putting together right now, where you could just practice what we just learned for like a very simple thing. So I'm putting it in code sandbox, but let's actually go through the next example, which is the greeting, which is another component. So let's actually create this. Can you guys hear me? I think you can hear me well.
Yep.
Okay, good. From React. So every time we do React, what do we use? We use the eyes, right? Import component and export. Keep that in mind always. So here we say function, and we went over the class, how to create a class component last time. So if you want to know that, maybe you could watch the other lecture. So let's give it a name actually. Greeting, return, JSX, so give it a div, and then here h2, we'll call it greeting. Save. Now it's not shown anywhere. Why is it not shown anywhere?
We have to export.
We have to export it first. Okay. So we say export default greeting. Right. Good. Still not shown anywhere. Why is that? This greeting is not shown anywhere in here.
You have to go to the app and then import there.
We have to put it in the app because the app is the parent. If you don't put anything in the app, it will not show. If you create a component and you don't put it in the app parent component, it will not show in the browser. So like the lakes is already in the here. So that's why all this stuff is from the lakes. So now if we want to put the greeting, we just put it right here. We say greeting, and then we can just do that. And then save and greeting. So that's what we put in the greeting component. All right. So now I want to show you how to use a component and make it a reusable component. Okay. So we're gonna pass a couple of things in component. In greeting. The first thing would be we're gonna pass a name. So let's just put my name first, and then we're gonna pass a profession or a job. Let's say. Let's give it let's say teacher here, and let's give we could give something else. Location could be location. MN, let's say. Okay. So that's that. Now it's a prop, so it's not shown anywhere because it's a prop. To show it here, we have to pass the prop here, props, and we could console log and we could see, but you guys already saw that. So how do we show my name here? So basically what we want to say here is we want to say we're going to give a paragraph here. I want to say, hi, my name is name here. I you say my job is job here, and I live in location, right? So how do we do that? Because right now, if we pass this, it's just gonna say, hi, my name is name, my job is job, and then I live in location. But we want to make that.
Curly brackets?
What is that?
Curly brackets.
Curly brackets. So we replace the name. curly brackets, what do we put here?
The variable name.
Props dot name.
Props.name, yeah. Because we want to grab it from props. Another way you could do it is you could just use a distraction. If you just want to put name here and make it clean, you could say constant and then put here name. And I think it's a name, location, doesn't matter the order. And here is a job. And then you say equal to props. So now you could just put name here, right? It's grabbing from up here. And the next one, the job, you could just replace with the job. And location, let me just make it so that it's wrapped. And location, we could replace with location. Hopefully that works. Otherwise, it will give us an error. Yep. So hi, my name is Duran. My job is a teacher, and I live in Minnesota. Okay. So that's one way of passing it. So now we want to reuse this component. How do we reuse it? So we want to make it reusable. We want to pass different people, not just me. To do that, we just copy it and paste it. And then we just replace this information to like Muhammad, something like business owner. And here, let's say Ohio, okay? So now if we save that, as you can see, it's actually bringing the greeting again. The reason for that is because we're just copying the component again. If you don't want that, so don't put anything hard-coded here. So you could actually create this message greeting in here, and it will give you only one. So now you can just remove it if you want. And now it will just give you the information. So if you want to pass something, if you want to reuse the component, don't add anything hard-coded. So usually you want to keep it clean, and you don't want to have something that you cannot change. So as you can see here, the information changed, and that's how you can reuse an app, a component, and use it for different things. Right now, basically we're copying and pasting. Instead of doing this, you could put all this information, Duran teacher, Minnesota, in like an object or something like that, and then also put this one in another in the same object or same what do you call a array, and then pass that information here, and then after that you could just map over it here, and then it will render. It will render everyone separately. So that's a power of creating reusing components. All right. So any questions so far about reusability, passing props? And these are props, keep in mind. This is props, and we're passing it to another component. Any questions?
Can we see for each, if you looped the data map for the names and you made it into array?
Yeah. So if you wanna put all these names in their own place, so what you could do is we could create like a person, say constant person, and then we could put it in an array. But we could put a object in each array. So remember, we did this a lot in our assignments. So you could say here name, and then you could say here run, and here you could also say location. We don't have to put that, but it's okay to put it on location. We could say MN, and we can put a job here. Okay, we could do the same thing for the other person. Okay, so we could create another object here. Say the same object right here, and then just replace the information to Muhammad, Ohio, and then this one, business owner. And now we don't even have to recopy this whole thing. We could just pass the person here, and then map over it. So we could just say person, and then put person here. And let's say pass it like that. As you can see, it doesn't show anything because we have to map over it. So right now, let's actually console log our props. So you can see what we have. Yeah, these ones are not working. Get rid of this. As you can see, our console log. This is the props. We have a person. Person has these two. So as you can see, we could just render it that way. So we have an array. And keep in mind that if you want to use a map, you always have to have an array. So right here, we could just use map to render that information. So we could say props dot what do we call person dot map, and then create a function here, callback function. We could say item here if we want, and then return the information we want to return. So we could return, like, let's say, just as an example, we can return like the name. So we could say like a paragraph, and then put here an item dot name, right? So if we go here, make it smaller, the run name. So now we could just put it here. Hi, my name is this, and then my job is, we could say item dot job. I think that's how it was. And then I live in, and then you could put this item dot location. So as you can see, hi, my name is Duran. My job is a teacher. I live in Minnesota. Da, da, da. So now we don't have to kind of like copy and paste the greeting. Whatever information you have here coming from the database or from the state, you could put all this in the state. Like we could literally just create a state and put this in the state. And that way, so we don't have the data being changed, and we could pass it to different components. So that's kind of like how you use a component. Any questions so far? All right, we have about 20 minutes. I'm going to give you guys a quick exercise to practice. Let me see. What was it? I was trying to create something, but I forgot. Okay, give me a second. Let me create one file here. Let's say constant. I'm trying to create the exercise for you guys. Okay. Cities. It's going to be a quick one so that you remember what you did. States, let's put states here. It's best to practice and also think of questions while I'm doing this. It's best to practice what you learn instead of just watching. So I'll give you a quick example, quick exercise. All right, so let's save that. Yes. Okay. What time do I have? 12. That's from React. I'll share the link of Code Sandbox so you can work on there. And I'll say here states. Okay, let's say list states. So in this exercise, you'll be showing list of states basically from a file, and you have to kind of like do the looping and all that. So let's just say here. So I'll share it in a minute. Okay, so here is what we're trying to do. Hopefully you guys see this. So now I'll share this link in a second. Let me save everything. And let me just go to, let me share. Where's the share? And you could fork it too. So keep that in mind. Copy. Okay. So let me share that. So so in this exercise, it's an individual exercise, so you could just work on it. Basically, what we're doing right now is we have app.js. I want you to show these states in here in app.js, and also I want you to render this data. Let me just toggle it. So it's a different states: Ohio, Minnesota, Seattle, and California. In states here, I want you to create a list of it quickly. So, any questions? I'll just give it to you, and you guys can work on it. And I'll give you from now till like 25. So about 10. I'll give you 10 minutes to work on it, and it's not fair, but just do as much as you can. Save all. Let me share the link again. There. Any questions about that assignment? So basically, you render the states in here. You import them. You import the state here, and then you import the data from here to here, and then create a state, and then render that here. Do as much as you can. It's not fair, but try your best. So I'll leave it to you. Let me know if you have any question. So I'll mute myself so you guys can work. Okay. So let's get back. Let me know, guys. Was that hard or was that easy? How did it go? I know most of you didn't finish. That's okay.
I didn't know what to start. It's like,
It didn't work. So who wants to share if they finished it or wants to show us? Anyone? Anyone wants to share? That's okay. How was it? Was it too hard? Was it? It was mostly how we kind of did it today in the assignment in the lecture, but I switched it a little bit. Information and just okay, we can go over it, no problem. So in this assignment, you're basically first step is to import. So I could have given you steps, but maybe next time I'll give you steps. So step one is import. Import a couple of things. You can import a couple of things. Import data. So to app.js. And then step two is import states component. Okay, so these are two first steps, and we're in these states actually. So let's just copy this to index, and I mean app.js. So this is what we're gonna do. So now we're gonna import the data. I'm gonna say import. So we're gonna go to data and look at the name of the data, which is states, and then that's what we're gonna call it, states here. And we're gonna say from. Now, if we just do that, if we say dot slash, it's not gonna show because we are in different folder. So we have to say dot slash, and then that's where it's gonna show. The next thing is we're gonna import the component states from dot slash states. Okay, so those are the two steps. The next thing is step three. Step three is create a state for imported data, right? So this is the imported data. We have to create a state for it. So we're going to create a state here. We're going to say constant, and then we're going to use a use state here. So now in Code Sandbox, it allows us automatically to import the use state. So where is it? It didn't import because we don't even have a React import React from React. So now we have to import the use state, which is same to as what we did. Okay, and we're gonna set the use state to what? Who can tell me? What are we gonna put here? Who remembers what we did about the lakes? And these states are kind of confusing because it's like same as the state we're. So this state here is like the different United States. It's not as same as the app state. So here we put these states that we imported. Okay, this is smaller. And don't worry about the errors. It keeps showing errors until we fix everything. Actually, it imported here by itself. So just get rid of that. All right, now we have the state and we have these states. It says never used, but we used it here. Oh, okay. We're kind of confusing things. we called our components states and we call this one states. So we're going to call our component a different name. Let's call it states component. All right. Easier that way. So you don't get confused. States component. I did this on the fly, so that's why it's a little bit not polished. And here we're importing states component. Okay. So now this should work. Why is it not working? Did we call it something else here? No. Let's call it states data. Just for sake of not confusing the states with the states data. Now we're going to use this and put it in here. As you can see, it works now. All right, so now we have to set the component. So to set the component, we have to put it somewhere here so that it shows here. So this is the parent component. So that was step 3 is create a state, and step 4. Step 4 is connect the states component to app.js, right? So to connect it, we already imported here. So all we have to do is just go here and say states component, right? Like that. So now whatever is in the states component will show here. Oh, right here, we didn't change the name. Right. So as you can see, it's showing now list of states. But we have to pass the data to that to this states, right? States component. So who can help me? How do we pass the data to there? To this component using props. So we want to pass the data here, and we want to pass it from here. So to do that, we need to use a props. So we have to put it here. Let's say states here equal to same name as states. And where are we getting this states from? We're getting it from here, from the state, the app state. Now we passed it, but it's not rendering here because there's we haven't invoked it. And as you can see here, this is a different way of exporting the function. So I was trying to throw you a curve for this one. So this is a different way of exporting it. So we could actually just remove this and put it underneath right here. It's going to be the same. You say export default states, my states data, says component, right? So it's the same as that. Now, if we want to render it, we have to put props here, and we have to map over it here, right? So to map over, we need to put this curly bracket because the mapping is basically a JavaScript. So we say states.map function. We say item here, and we could open here return. We could use a list, so we could actually put a UL here, and then closing UL, and then return the LIs. So we say LI, and then we render the item LI. Save. As you can see, list of states: Ohio, Minnesota, Seattle, California. So I know this was I rushed it and I didn't give you guys enough time to. We shouldn't import this here. Enough time to do it, but this is kind of things that you have to kind of practice more, understand more, and then eventually it will click. So it's all about like which component is connected to which component. Where do we send it the data? Basically setting the data to the state, passing it as a props like this, and then go into that component itself, and then using props to render the data, either mapping over it or just using destruction to show the list of whatever you want to show. So that's that. Any questions? Any questions about that? All right, let's go over the assignment. And also the assignment, if you have already forked it, I am trying to change something from it. So do not fork it yet. So let's go to TM, login. And this is the assignment day 2. Go all the way down and we have Instagram clone. So here is where you kind of graduate into from like basic functions and stuff, doing basic things, variables, to actually building a real life thing. So where you have already application that's already built for you. You don't have to do most of the heavy lifting. You just have to work on the props and making sure each application each component works with the other component. So in this basically assignment, you'll be working with information. So we have dummy data here. So this dummy data is an array with an object with objects. These objects have 2 things. So these are like posts, is basically Instagram posts. So this is one post. It has comments here, as you can see. It has a timestamp. It has likes, the name, username, the person who posted it. And also we have another one here. So we have 2 of them, right? So basically what the main point is, you go to app.js, and here is like the instruction of what you need to do. It gives you like, it says here, import a state hook, which is use the state. So I'll be doing changes to this function here. So don't fork it yet. I will make the changes right after this. But yeah, so basically you're importing that data, the dummy data, you put it in a state, you're rendering, you're kind of like importing a couple of components. So here it says add search and posts here to render them. So these are components, search and posts. So you have to go here and see components. Oh, I see search here. So you're gonna import this search.js, and post this, you're gonna import post.js. Make sure you render this instead of post only. What else? So that's all you need to know. You just have to read more about the assignment. There is like more information about it. Each file has like instructions of how to do things. So make sure you read that. But if you put the time in it, it will help you learn all these props and components and how to use components together. So you're not doing most of the heavy lifting. All you're doing is just connecting things, and you're not designing the Instagram. It's already designed for you. You have the component already set up. You just have to hook things together. It's like I gave you like it's like IKEA kind of product basically. So you have all the pieces, just put them together basically. Any questions about the assignment or anything else? Okay, no questions. Okay, So so yeah, I will make the changes and I will let you guys know when I finish the changes. And then you can go ahead and fork it. You're gonna be working it tomorrow. So keep that in mind. So you could also watch videos on YouTube and stuff about React props and things like that if you're confused. But let me know if something is really like you're stuck on something, so I can come in and help you maybe go over it. So we'll stop it here. Stop sharing. Any questions before we close? All right, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
So overall, what is the prompt like actually does in an overall conclusion of
What do you mean?
like the prompt? I'm kind of understanding it, but I'm trying to see like what is the back end of what does he actually does when he call a function to like actually put in the prompt on.
I mean, what you mean? What is the point of it? Like, what is the end goal?
Yeah.
So basically, the end goal is to build just like Instagram and to build like Twitter and things like that. Of course, you're not going to be using props all the time. Props are basically like it's like if you have a child and a toddler and they're learning how to like ride a bicycle, you have like a 3-wheel bicycle, right? So props are basically like the beginner way of like managing like passing data around, but eventually you can graduate from props to something called Redux, which will come. So but to understand Redux, you have to kind of like understand props. So the main goal of props is basically passing data. So we have a bunch of like JavaScript files here. And how do we take a data, let's say an object, and how do we take it from one to another one, without doing any changes or without mixing up the data or making any major changes to it. So usually props, when you're passing it, it stops you from like changing the data. So you have to kind of modify it in a different way. You have to copy it and then change the copy and then send back to state. So it's basically passing around the data. That's basically what it comes down to. So yeah, that's all I can say about it. Any other question? Okay. Try your best, inshallah. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions, and take care. Assalamu alaikum.